Hello, everyone. Thanks for waiting, and we will start our webinar now. Again, thanks everyone who has dialed in for our webinar on enriching classroom education with online practice lab. Just a quick introduction. This is Venkatesh Perumal. I head the business development and marketing at CourseTech.
And this is Tony Rylands. I'm a systems engineer on the pre-sales engineering side. And just want to say a quick thank you to everybody that is out there. The education space is something that is changing. It's very dynamic, but I see how much investment is going into educating our young ones and the next generations around STEM. Super excited to be working in this industry and really appreciate everything that you guys are doing to change the learning methods and enhance education. So thank you.
Thanks, Tony. In today's webinar, we'll go through a couple of slides, which basically talks about current state of industry itself from an education standpoint. How does the industry trend look like? There is a customer use case that we'll walk you through in terms of what are the challenges that they faced and how those challenges were addressed using CourseTech CLaaS, which is Cloud Lab as a Service. And Tony would also walk you through with a short demo of the CLaaS product. And if you have any questions in between the webinar, please feel free to chat in the chat window, and we'll take up those questions and answers at the last. So quickly, moving on to the current state. As told by Deborah Delizzi, student access to technology is no more a privilege, right? So the technology is everywhere, and any participation that is being done from an education standpoint, you definitely require something to practice on. And with large surveys being done, it is proven that students are able to understand the concept a bit more. And similarly, the learning has increased in the digital learning space by engaging with a platform or with a product where they can go and practice it. So it's not just a skill that they gain during the initial phase, but then it's a continuous education. So it's like skill, reskill, reskill, and reskill. So it's not just the students, and even for the professionals who are getting into the newer technology space, they have to reskill themselves. And with latest technologies, it has become imperative that everyone requires a playground where they can go and practice it. So without practicing and just going by the content, you can only gain so much. So you will see how online practice labs can really be helpful.
Yeah, so if we look at the key challenge that institutions are having in the education space today, it's how do we take the coursework and the assessments, how do we build a hands-on lab environment for students? But how do we make that a real environment and real time? How do we give them access when they want access? As the next generation comes into the education space, they're wanting, they grow up utilizing tools like Netflix for video. So their whole mindset is different. They want to be able to utilize learning when they want and have it available when they have time. And another big concern for companies is, again, giving them real world hands-on experience. A lot of time labs are really helpful through the hands-on learning process. But when it comes down to getting a job and having real world experience, that's a huge concern. It's a huge challenge in the education space. And it's something that we are trying to help with, is to provide real environments, real hands-on experience for the students, so that when they go into the job world, they are not only prepared, but they have that experience that they can take with them. And then taking that and tailoring that, again, to the coursework and the assessments. That is key to increasing the learning engagement with the students. And if we look at industry trends, I read this report. It was the NMS Horizon report. If you're an EDUCAUSE member, the report is available on the EDUCAUSE website. And this report talked about the top 12 industry trends in the education space that all institutions are looking at to try to solve or to try to increase their fluency in. The first one that highlighted what we are talking about today was expanding access and convenience. So as I talked about a minute ago, people expect to be able to learn and work wherever they are, and they want constant access to that learning material. They also want constant access to each other. It's become more of a social environment, being able to share their experiences. So how do we build an environment that fosters that? Spurring innovation. This is a big one. Being able to increase innovation. When someone has an idea, we don't want to throw up barriers to them getting access to the tools they need in order to solve those problems or those challenges. So some of the things that we were going over today is to how do we increase their access or reduce friction in order to spur innovation. Improving the teaching profession. This is a huge one with most institutions that we were talking to. The emphasis again is around changing the existing classroom behaviors, being able to have more hands-on technology enhanced learning practices. And that ties into blending learning design. There's two methods that we usually see. We have the traditional universities, long-term training. They understand a topic very deeply and they study that over a long period of time. And then there's the online learning space, which is usually designed around just certifications. Here's a short course you can go through. Here's how to take some practice tests. Here's how to pass that test and then get your certification. But that doesn't translate well, again, into the real world space. So being able to take the best of both worlds, have that the benefits of having a long-term training in the education space, long-term training, deep knowledge in a certain topic, but then tie in real-world hands-on learning. And then spreading the digital fluency. So there's so many different technologies and tools that are available, and it's constantly changing. So how do we continue to integrate those new tools and technologies into the learning process? How do we stay dynamic or fluid in that space? So again, as students go through and enter into the real world, we want to make sure that they have access and have hands-on experience with the newest tools, the latest and greatest tools. So this is also a huge concern for education institutions. And then fostering authentic learning, being able to have the learning tied to the student, the best way the student that needs to learn. I know for myself growing up, I had a tough time in the classroom space. We didn't have hands-on. Once I got out of school or into the community college space, it was on my the pressure was on me. I had more hands-on experience. I was tied in internships, real world experiences. For me, that's when education thrived. So I can definitely relate that everyone learns a little bit different, and so giving them access to the tools they need in order to be successful is the key.
Yeah, so with the key emphasis which has been there in terms of how learning can be made much more easier and accessible, this is a use case that we would like to walk you through as one of our customer who is also the leading e-learning or online learning provider, not from a technology standpoint, but also from a certification standpoint. And they have presence in 150 plus countries. And there are more than 500,000 professionals who are learning at any point in time, various tools and various technologies. And they've been there in the top 20 IT training companies in 2017. Um, One of the key challenge they faced was first, how can they manage the rapid growth that they are seeing in terms of number of people enrolling to their online classes or online courses. Secondly, they had their own internal lab, which was not equipped with scaling features which typically a cloud can provide. So daily the students enrollment were increasing. However, the underlying platform which was used as a cloud lab was not able to service them. And similarly, the access to the labs was not even provided at a point, where they can access it from anywhere, anytime. Another key issue was also that they were not able to scale their cloud lab based on new courses or new technology courses that they were inducting over a period of time. Third, it is also very important that you provide a seamless learning experience through one platform rather than having students or professionals to go to log into multiple tools. So LMS integration was very, very key. Every student who goes and logs in through to an LMS, he gets the content. But then Cloud Lab initially was, they were accessing it somewhere else. So they wanted the Cloud Lab also to be part of individual courses. For example, if you are providing a course on big data, so you're going through the content, and if you have Cloud Lab access right then and there, you're able to practice the whole concept right when you're learning, right? So that was very, very key. The requirement was also in terms of, they can access more reports in terms of how people are engaging, what is the Cloud Lab usage, and finally, the learning space. They were pioneer in providing learning content, right? However, the other part, which is providing Cloud Lab as a service itself, was an additional value add. But then, how can they really bring the total cost of ownership under control? That was very key for them. Um, and how so after they started adopting course tag CLaaS, which is Cloud Lab as a service, the student registration started increasing, the engagement started increasing, people accessing the lab at any point in time also increased because they were able to access the course content as well as the Cloud Lab anywhere, anytime, because it's in cloud. This, though we started with very fewer labs, but over a period of time, the number of labs that were offered started increasing. Though, so the course stack class provided them the flexibility of adding more and more courses and the labs. So it's not just big data. There's Spark, there is Apache Lab, there is LambStack Lab, there is AWS Lab, Azure Lab. You just keep adding labs as and when the new technology need is there in the market. So that was very, very key. And this also led to zero operations from Simplilearn, right? So entire Cloud Lab itself was completely auto-driven or put in all autopilot mode. So the labs were online. The maintenance was done on the fly. There was zero operations from Simplilearn, and that actually gave them a good return in terms of the total cost of ownership.
Yeah, so the solution that we provided with them or worked with them on is what we call CLaaS, Cloud Lab as a Service. Now, although this is focused on the online training space and the success we've had in that space, what we're doing now is taking that model and merging that with the traditional higher education space. So the solution that we provided with them, again, CLaaS, helped to, with the integration with the LMS, automatically onboards the students and the labs. It allowed the students to have access to a pre-built catalog of labs where they could go and practice and have hands-on experience even outside of the classroom or outside of the courseware that they were currently working on. This, again, these are real environments. So as we'll show you here in the demo, we provided lab access to the applications that they need as well as the environments that they need. So if they are working through an AWS course or an Azure course, it's important and key to give them access to the real world portals, consoles, and environments so that they can have, again, hands-on experience in that real world space. As Venki talked about, unifying their learning experience. So as part of this platform, we integrated in with their LMS. Now we know that there's multiple different LMSs out there. So for the demo today, we have our own LMS that we've created for demo environments. But in the real world, what will happen is the LMS, that front-end LMS, whether it's Blackboard, Moodle, Canvas, etc., once the student is enrolled in the LMS, Core Stack or our platform CLaaS on the back end will go deploy the lab, the environment, the user permissions, everything that the student needs, as well as security and any other policies relating to regulatory concerns, or anything else relating to that lab environment will automatically be provisioned, provided to the student, and then automatically descaled or auto-scaled as needed to save on cost, and then torn down when the course is finished. And then, so that's automating the complete provisioning and deprovisioning of the lab, as well as we have the ability to do right sizing. So what that means is if a student is not using the environment, why are we paying for it? Let's go ahead and we'll turn it off so that it's like turning the lights off when you leave. However, when the student logs back into the LMS to get access to the lab then will be fired back up. So this was key on saving cost. If we had thousands of students sitting out there all with labs that were only being used 5% of the time, that's a ton of waste. So being able to streamline that cost was key as part of this solution, as well as reporting, being able to look at usage, have visibility into what the student is doing, not only from a grading standpoint, but then also to help them if the student runs into some snags going through their lab, giving access to the teacher so that they can log in and help them through the process was also key as part of the solution.
Yeah, so based on how CourseTag CLaaS has been performing, our customers really happy in terms of how the kind of flexibility that CourseTag CLaaS provides in terms of their online learning offering. But this also helped them to use the same concept of class for the classroom session which they conduct for corporate as well. So big corporates today are leaning more towards reskilling. The newer technologies are really forcing the big corporates to take that next step because there's hardly any resource or engineers that you would get outside because the technology is very new. So it is very important for the corporates to provide that reskilling platform. And on the other side, if you look at it, the newer technology also puts lots of emphasis on the right kind of infrastructure that you require. Everyone has a laptop, but then laptop can only do so much. And as a learner or as a student, you also have earlier you need to have the knowledge of how can I install a package. Is this package good for me? Does it suffice my need of whatever I'm learning or whatever I'm practicing on my laptop? All those worries have been completely taken away with CLaaS, right? So CLaaS provides you the right size environment. It provides you right packages. And it takes care of pretty much everything that is required for you to learn from a lab perspective. So that's what the director of Simplilearn also said. The outcome was really great. They were really happy in terms of the engagement that they saw from a student standpoint. They were able to complete the course. The course rate was increasing. The student registration rate was increasing because lab was definitely a value add because students do require big amount of investments in terms of infrastructure itself for them to practice something, right? A content can only provide you so much. So, and it also helped them to increase their revenue stream in terms of exploring more into the enterprise and the corporate training. And they were able to manage this whole growth and the global expansions that they were going through.
Yeah, and as far as increasing revenue streams, this will also give you an opportunity to not only give the students access to more labs and more real world environments, but it does give you the option to be able to give them an opportunity to purchase extra labs outside of course content. So let's say they're personally have an interest in online gaming or writing code in Python, but their courseware is not tied to that. Well, as part of that, they could then log into their LMS and say, I want to get some access to these environments to help get some more hands-on experience. So that would be also an upsell opportunity for your institution. So now what we're going to do is provide a demo. Again, the use case we talked about was tailored towards the online learning space, but our goal is to be able to take the successes we've had in that space, the best practices we found in that space, and tie that into the higher education space. So what I'm going to provide demo-wise is I'm going to log into our LMS platform from a student view, show you what it looks like for a student, how easy it is to access the lab environments, to go through the hands-on practice labs, as well as what it looks like from a teacher institution view to add and enroll new students into a lab. The one caveat is for LMS agnostic reasons, we've created our own LMS for the demo experience. So imagine as I'm going through this, that this is Canvas, Blackboard, Moodle, or whatever LMS that you are using in your institution. So first I'm going to log in as the student. So when the student logs into their portal, again, this would be your LMS, which classes they are currently enrolled in or which course they're currently enrolled in. They can see their current lab environments. And from here, they can look at the details relating to that lab. Now, this would actually end up tying into your courseware and your lab. So they would have step-by-step instructions on what to do here, as well as they would have the coursework to for the step-by-step instructions to go through the labs as well. But here they can view exactly what's being installed as part of that lab. So this Apache lab, it's an HA proxy Apache lab. So in that instance, CoreStack and CLaaS needs to install 2 versions of Apache or 2 instances. So in this case, CoreStack is building the instances or the virtual machines. It's adding on the operating systems. In this case, it's Linux or Ubuntu on both instances, and then it's adding on the Apache application. And then as well, it builds a third terminal. That's the HA proxy terminal, where that's where you're going to do most of the work as far as being able to have a backup web server environment. So basically what this lab is doing is providing them a real world access to real labs on real virtual machines in a real environment, and gives them full access to the environment. So it's not a stripped down lab. In my last job, we did a lot of road shows, and I would build pods for the sessions. Usually we would have 2 students to a pod. So that's, cutting their hands-on experience in half there right away. But it would take me for a normal 8-hour class, it would take me, and let's say I had 10 pods, it would probably take me about 2 days to put together those pods, get everything set up, all the permissions, usernames, passwords, everything created for that 8-hour class. So here, all of that is happening automatically on the back end and managed by our CLaaS solution. So right from here, the students would be able to jump into that lab. So here you can see there's the 3 terminals that were created as part of this lab. And so from here, the student could log into those terminals. Oops. So this is the HA proxy lab. We can look at the version and make sure it matches. And they would do that for each one of these different terminals and walk through their lab. Pretty straightforward. So now if we go back to my labs, you can see that they have access to a second lab here. Again, it shows the details, access to that lab. So now what I want to do is I'm going to log out and enroll this student into a new course. So I'll log in as an administrator. Again, all of this is going to be done automatically in your LMS, either by administration enrolling a student or a student logging into the LMS and enrolling in that course and then being provided access to the lab environments. So in this case, instead of providing access to an environment and an application, I want to, in this case, the student's going to enroll in a class to learn AWS. So in order to learn AWS, again, to have real world experience, they need to have access to the AWS console. So I'm going to enroll the student in the AWS course. And then what's going to happen on the back end is CoreStack is going to go log in AWS, and everything that's part of that lab, user permissions, what they're allowed to have access to, what they're not allowed to have access to, all of that is going to be built automatically on the back end. So if I log in as a student here, it's going to take a minute or so to complete. The student will see that they have access to this lab. If I try to have access, okay, It's going to take a minute in order for that lab to be done being built. One of the things you'll notice when I log into that lab environment, it is the AWS portal. However, it's been locked down to just what the student needs in order to finish their learning experience. Just what they need in order to be successful. So they have access to the real world, but yet they can't go off and go create some BitTorrent machines or go do blockchaining or do anything else that your education institution doesn't want these students to do. So if I look at it, it should be done now, lab access details. This has provided, gone out again to AWS, created a real world portal for the student. There's direct login access. The student will log into this environment. This is their own account, which they can actually take with them later if that's part of the class or the courseware. And this has just been created for the student. Now, if the student logs in here, I know as part of this lab, we let the students use a couple instances in EC2, only what's needed in order to provision their lab. And you can see here, only with T2 micro instances. So that's a smaller instance. It's low in cost or free in a lot of cases. It's for the education space, but the student can't go build a huge BitTorrent machine or a huge blockchaining machine on this account. Same thing with Lightsail. The student cannot provision Lightsail. So the student says, oh, I got this cool AWS account. I'm going to go out there and do something I'm not supposed to do, and I'll use all the school's resources. As you can see here, the student's not authorized to use that service or that application. So the neat thing here is this is giving students access to the real AWS portal. When they go in for a job interview or they hit the real world, this is the real portal. Although they're getting locked out from doing things that they're not supposed to do, this is real world experience with the real AWS portal, and this is key. Nobody else that we know is doing this effectively for the students. This has always been a manual process for most institutions that can take days to set these up for the students, and it's not an easy process. One other thing I'll show you, if I log back out as I'll log in as the trainer, excuse me. The trainer will also be able to see access of the student's view. So let's say the student says or tells the instructor, I'm having some issues, I need some help. The teacher or the trainer can actually log into the portal or again in your LMS and look at that student's access details if it's allowed. And so from here, the trainer or the teacher, professor can log into that environment and help them through that step. Same thing with all of the labs. If they're having trouble in their Apache 8A proxy development lab, they can look at the student's credentials, look at their access details, and log right into their environment and help them through any issues that they're having or walk them through what the next steps are. Outside of that, we also have a dashboard and detailed reporting and logging so that you can get overall visibility on what students are accessing what and how long they're accessing that. And we can get extremely detailed on what logs or reports you want to pull from a cost or just a logging standpoint. Yeah, so that's the lab from this stage. But what we like to say is we'd love to have further conversations with you. Please reach out to us. We could do a more in-depth demo, or maybe what we could do is do a proof of concept and create a lab that would tie to your coursework, and we can show you the process of how easy it is to be able to provide and tailor these hands-on labs to your coursework and increase and enrich the students' learning education.
Yeah, so thanks, Tony. This is, though you're able to picturize, the whole LMS flow, but then it also is so easy in terms of once you integrate with CourseStack CLaaS and you map for individual courses, if you just say that it has lab, all that is exactly what you need to tell from your LMS standpoint. And as soon as the student is registered, every other aspect of your enrollment, access, everything is done automatically by CourseStack. And the student logs in, he has the content, he has the lab, and he's just on day one, he is able to access everything real time, real environments. So with that being said, we have a couple of more minutes for questions and answers. So feel free to ask any questions.
Yeah, so if you look at the GoToWebinar meeting pane, there's a question and answer chat window where you feel free to ask us any questions. Again, please, if this is interesting and you want to take a deeper dive and see how we can partner with you to create a similar environment for your institution, email us at sales@corestack.io, or if you go to our website, corestack.io, there's a link for a demo or to reach out to us. So please reach out to us. Be more than happy to talk with you more about how we can take some of the benefits of what we're doing with online learning and bring it into the higher education space. So we don't see any questions.
Although we've been asked, a couple of, there's a common question that has always been asked in terms of, are these labs, provided in a dedicated fashion or a shared fashion? So each and every technology lab works in a different way, right? So we do have labs such as Big Data Lab, which is kind of a huge cluster, because if you have to provide real-time experience, then a single node or a single VM does not really suffice your requirement. So you really need to have a cluster built, and the clusters are pretty big. So these are shared labs, but however, each student has got his own space within the cluster where he can go and practice. And similarly, a smaller lab like SlamStack, which is only a Linux or Angular MongoDB labs, there it is more of a dedicated lab. Right, so I see that there's a question. Is there any relationship between service you provide and OpenStack?
Yeah, great question. So we talked a lot, right, about public cloud, but our solution supports VMware, traditional data center infrastructure, bare metal services. So we could support all your on-prem or your data center infrastructure that you already have on the campus, as well as we support OpenStack, private, any OpenStack public service, Oracle, AWS, Azure. We're adding on Google pretty soon, and many more. To us, we're completely agnostic. One of the unique things we do from a cloud governance and management standpoint that nobody else in the industry does that I'm aware of is we support the native DSLs and languages. So for AWS, we utilize CloudFormation. For Azure, Azure Resource Manager. For OpenStack, we utilize Heat and Mistral to manage the infrastructure. So that provides facilities like yours, any investment that you've made towards creating templates and scripts, managing your infrastructure, all of that can be pulled into our platform and utilized day one. As well as we have a lot of tools inside of our platform to help you manage that infrastructure outside of what we showed you today. So we actually have an enterprise platform called CoreStack. It's a cloud governance management and security platform that manages all your infrastructure, private, public, hybrid, multi-cloud, etc. CLaaS, Cloud Lab as a Service, is taking CoreStack, designing it just for the education space to provide labs. So I'd love to continue this conversation offline if you want, and we can do a deeper dive into that. Another question is, this kind of ties into the question asked earlier. Do you support or do you only support AWS and Azure? So again, like I just mentioned, sorry, that question came in earlier, is we support all public and private infrastructure.
Any more questions?
Well, we thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it. Again, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to talk with you a little bit more.
All right, so we have one more question, Tony. Do you have documentation as to the way licensing works in this environment? Yes, we do have it. As I told you, each and every lab infrastructure requirement differs, and it also differs from a standpoint wherein what is your underlying cloud that you want to utilize? Do you want your own account to be there, or do you want everything as a package? We can definitely discuss more. I'll reach out to you, and we'll have a separate discussion on this, and we'll take it forward. Hope that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah,
Perfect.
and there's multiple, for everybody else, there's multiple different ways that we can license. And so we have a SaaS or managed and hosted offering. CoreStack and CLaaS, Cloud Lab as Service, can also be installed on-prem or in your cloud environment. And so it depends on where it's installed and who's managing the infrastructure, and it depends on the cost. But it breaks down basically to per student, per lab pricing. We also have some packages where we can work with you on adding, managing all the infrastructure for you, managing all the labs for you, a complete managed environment where all you need to do is we do some integration work into your LMS for your courseware, and we'll manage all the labs for you. So we're completely open on how we want to work with you, or how we can grow our partnership and what works best for you. All righty.
Okay. All right, so if you have any more questions, feel free to respond to the email address that's there on the screen, which is sales@coursestack.io, or to the webinar registration link also has my email address, venki@coursestack.io. So feel free to drop us any question. We'll be happy to discuss further. So with that being said, I'd like to thank everyone who has joined the webinar, and looking forward to talking to you soon. Thanks.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.